Dr. Jodie Bond, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, hello. Very excited to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. I came across your book, Spiritual Fertility, maybe like 6 months or a year ago. And it was one of the best things I've read. And I've been wanting to talk to you about this for so long. And I'm so pleased you agreed to come on the podcast. You have just I always say to my clients that nutrition is one thing. And I think it's an amazing foundation and we have to get that right. But there's so much more. And it is a lot of the time goes beyond our realm of understanding. And this is what your book is all about.
Yeah.
How did you get into this?
It's, my book, Spiritual Fertility, which came out with Hay House, is a primer and a guidebook, basically, on the clinical work that I've done in the world of holistic fertility work in New York City over the last 2 decades, basically. And all my extra training as a healer and my journeys and my educational path and how I navigated, how do you find that line between the allopathic, the Western medical model, and alternative medicine? And at the end of the day, as I started to see just naturally more and more people were coming to me with fertility imbalances or not being able to get pregnant when they wanted to, or endocrine disruptions in general, hormonal health issues across the board, younger and younger women I was seeing, whereas when I first started out, it was I'd always see folks who were in their late 30s. And then it started, the sliding scale of age here, I started to see younger and younger women who really are, I believe, impacted by the stress of the modern world, the exogenous pollution and hormones, and a lot of mishandling and treatment by their medical professionals, or trauma that's unresolved, and life experiences. So I came to this moment where I was like, what is it that I'm doing differently here than just what I'm classically trained in, which is traditional Chinese medicine or classical Chinese medicine, which I was my normal course of treatment for my patients. And I started to notice that I was pulling in a lot of other elements of spiritual practice, right? So there's already a component of spirituality or acknowledgement of the emotions, the emotional body, and how it impacts health and classical Chinese medicine. But how could that then start to work better for patients now, right? So what's the ancient medicine for the modern world? And what I love about fertility in general, what really lights me up, and working with the difficulty of it, which is for a lot of folks includes a lot of loss and a lot of disappointment and a lot of trauma. What I say to my clients all the time is that when you don't get pregnant when you want to, massive window of healing opportunity is opening up. And it's not like any other time in your life, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you suffer from, bad headaches or even a chronic injury, you're never going to do or read or research or, drive an hour across town to see a special doctor like you will when it comes to fertility. You never start to analyze your relationship with your partner, your transgenerational history, trauma, your work, right? It's a beautiful window. And because my belief at the core as a healer is that, all symptoms are exactly that the root of everything is what, as healers and as human beings, our real journey is about addressing and uncovering. And that's kind of what provides our life path, right? Mm-hmm. So the book Spiritual Fertility is again like my roadmap to how to start to use spiritual practices to help get pregnant.
Yes. And it is, you've got so many amazing exercises at sort of each chapter, but you just mentioned something before that I'd love to go into in more depth, because I don't think a lot of people have come across this before. What is transgenerational trauma, and how does it affect our fertility?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. And people are speaking about it more and more. And in biology, it's known as more epigenetics, right? So the epigenetics, which is sort of like how your environment meets your biology, and they interchange between the two, right? Like the age-old question, how much does environment really shape us, right? Versus our biology. So, but transgenerational trauma specifically, when we think about reproduction, you are your mother's daughter. Your mother is her mother's daughter. And as you know, that wonderful fact about you were actually inside of your grandmother, right? Because you were inside of your mother who was inside of her. There's a quality of what the past, our ancestors experienced, right? And what we hold of that. And so certainly, if you think about it, of course we're impacted by our ancestors, right? So the trauma piece there isn't necessarily the negative part of that. Trauma means wound. That's what the word means. And wounds, my daughter fell off her bike. She was learning to ride, and I had to go somewhere. I was in a hurry. And so I swooped her up. I said, she was crying. I said, you're fine, get in the car. Guess what happened? Next time she got on the bike, it took 45 minutes, right, to even talk her into getting onto it. When if I had just taken the time at that moment, right, the healing would have been not as long. So some wounds, right, that aren't healed when they happen can be passed down through time, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we're aware of these. When I work one-on-one with clients, I go through a map of trauma, transgenerational trauma. I explore certain things like what I call the family crypt, which is like secrets, right? It's such a secret that it has to almost have like a sarcophagus of secrecy around it. But maybe you caught wind of it, my second cousin, my mom's first cousin, died very early on in the 1980s of AIDS, and it was like hush. No one in the family spoke about it, but I heard it. I overheard something, so I wanted to always address that and talk about it. And it made, this is an example of how I was trying to be somewhat of maybe a little bit of a black sheep, but also a healer. And what was so big, the problem was, it was so much grief and sadness at the root, right? And then the stigma at that time. So you see then, and then of course, like, what does this have to do with fertility? What does this matter besides just the fact that it's about reproduction? Because trauma, it makes stress hormones in your body when it happens. Adrenaline, cortisol, it puts you into a fight or flight situation. I don't think there are any wounds that don't make your animal body hyper vigilant, right?
Yeah.
So guess what high stress hormones do? They talk to every other hormone in the body. That's right.
Yeah.
Because your animal body, even if everything's great on paper, your animal body's like, well, maybe like, let's just do next month. Like, this one doesn't feel quite right. Like, what's the safest environment, the best time? And so that's when, at like that example, as I start to map out with clients, like, it's not just about it's not happening. It's like, let's figure out where the pieces are of engagement in your nervous system, right? And how is that keeping you in fight or flight? How is that keeping your animal body from being like, cool, let's do this, right?
So what are some examples of that? What could that be? And also things that are passed down, like, could it be something, because when I think about what you've said in this transgenerational trauma, I'm thinking, what if my grandma was stressed out about something? Is that then impacting my ability to fall pregnant? Is that how it worked? Or what are other examples?
Sure. No, that's a great question. And I'm sure probably your listeners today, you could, on a very, on the most superficial level, we can start thinking about the stories that we inherited, right? Even before we tried to get pregnant or thinking about it, like, well, your grandmother had, 5 miscarriages before her first son was born, right? right? Or she lost, or a mystery around it, like something went wrong and the baby was lost. And so when you hear that, especially before you've started your fertility, open window, so to speak, it influences your narrative. Yeah. It starts to be like, well, maybe if that was hers, then it's going to be mine.
Yeah.
And so that's another example of a sort of way that the narrative and the story can be not exactly so deeply in what the endocrine system is that you inherited, but kind of a side effect of those stories.
Right.
But to your point, though, it is true. I think that I hesitate to see that it has to be a prolonged stress or trauma. In the world of trauma-informed therapy, which I do a lot of in my practice, there's acute trauma that's very acute and present with this. There's a chronic trauma, which is sort of like, think about somebody who's living in an abusive home for a very long time, right? And then you have complex traumas, which is a kind of combination of both of those. So I think that a lot of, for instance, in New York City, because over 10% of the population here is of Jewish descent, and a lot of them were immigrants from pretty terrible situations post World War II. I started to see in my patients with Jewish descent tracking back, right? So a lot of times their grandmothers were in concentration camps, starved, and what you would call complex trauma situations, right? So I do see correlations between complex trauma situations in the past and current endocrine systems, the body, in my patients.
So, because I'm sitting here going, oh my God, I was Jewish. I am Jewish. Is this going to affect, at one point, is this going to affect my fertility? Like, is there something that happened that I wasn't even aware of? It wasn't even around me. Is that going to affect my endocrine system?
Sure. Well, and this is, I should have, even before getting into, let's talk about the things that can go wrong, right? Or the things that can make it take longer, right, to get pregnant. Instead of not getting pregnant when you want to, you have to enter into this window of healing. I should say that, like I said, with the narrative, that when you're listening to somebody like me, whose job and life has been about helping people, and sometimes the more traumatized and complex systems, right? Like, run all of that through your own filter, right? Protect your narrative, in other words, right? Like, not everything I'm saying applies to you, right? And if it does, if you get a good intuitive hit, like, that might be something to look into. Then that's when to dive in deeper, and to do more research, to work with somebody like me, or to start reading about it and diving into it, on your own. I feel, as a woman who has devoted her life to women's health, and as an extension of that, I'm a real advocate for women's ability to really be able to speak and be connected to their own intuition and what they feel is happening. I'm always very hesitant to say that, my way is the way. I'm very anti-guru, as one would say, because I really think that all the best healers and doctors and magicians, so to speak, and witches that I've worked with in my life, at the end of my work with them, I feel more resolved in my own voice, right? I don't need them anymore. They only strengthened and facilitated my own connection to knowledge, right?
So if people are sitting going, oh, like, how do I work out if I've got transgenerational trauma? What's kind of the steps that they can take? Sure. Is it that we all have to work with someone like you that can help guide us to tap into our intuition, or is it that we we can figure it out on our own?
Sure. I think you can figure it out on your own, quite honestly. That's certainly what my book is about, right?
Yeah.
It's about that first chapter. I start with transgenerational trauma and I end with prayer, you know?
Yes.
So I work as low down as possible and as high up as I can, right? As low down as necessary and as high up as possible. Let me get that right. But I think that I think a lot of times, and I talk about the 5 identifying steps or a map within the book. So if you read that and feel that there's something within that, you're like, absolutely, I've got this. One of which is what I call a replacement child. And if you are a child yourself of somebody who experienced grief or loss, and then didn't necessarily take as much time to heal that wound, right? Because it was probably a pretty significant wound before wanting to bring in as much joy and love as possible, right? Then guess what energetically you kind of feel in your entire life? It's like, well, I'm not my older sister who died when she was 4, you know, and I came in right after that. There's something in you that will never be able to compare, right? It's a debt almost. It's not fair. Not fair. So, but it happens, right? So there's within the book, there's a map, and certainly if you feel, especially if you're in that window of not getting pregnant when you want to, and you read those and you're like, that's absolutely it, then you know, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Now I have to really ask you to talk more about your journey, because I love your story about how you sensed your daughter before she was conceived. You had a conversation with her, or you saw her at some point. There was definitely a connection.
Yeah.
But then it sounds like through your book that you thought you were really ready for a baby, but then time passed and it just wasn't happening. And then you ended up having dreams about whales and trying to come out. Was it jumping out a plane or protecting whales?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. You're a good reader.
Oh my God, I love that bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about your story? And then also, I feel like this needs to lead into the most beautiful part, I think, of your book, where you talk about connecting back into your intuition and listening to the unconscious language of how you can kind of give yourself reassurance on your fertility journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you experience this, Jodie, but I do, where I think we all do, where we know something in our gut, but we're not quite ready to do what it's going to take to get out of the situation, right? Or to address the conflict, right? It's like a lot of the times, I think we all sort of have a handle on the things that we're sometimes sweeping under the rug, or feelings that are like, this isn't a good situation, this isn't right, you know? And going back to the peace, meaning the place of feeling like I am one with the universe, everything is unfolding like it should. There's a path, there's a plan for me. I was born when I was supposed to be born, right? When you're in that space, which I call the expansive, which is what I teach in the first chapter of the book, guess what starts to be lowered, right? Stress hormones, right? It's a lot different than I have to keep track of everything. It's all on my shoulders. Let me dun, right? It's very, I think that's sort of, it's unique to women in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Since the sexual revolution, and birth control has only been out for married women, you know, since 1967, right? Which was literally the first time ever to really put a real seal and block on the connection between heart, uterus, sex, reproduction. And then all of that started to get mixed up with being in the workforce and being in stressful situations of industrialization and modernity, and like how do you even do this as a new family structure? it's like you can feel, even as I'm talking about it, it's just contraction. Like there's so much of that where I feel like I have to make my path. There's not a path for me. It's not unfolding. I have to make it, right?
Just needing to control everything, right?
Control it, yeah, because it's new, really, we haven't, it's new in our biological and genetic memory. And also it's a wonderful opportunity to be an individual and to do things as women we were never able to do before. But also sort of the unintended consequences of it is like, wow, that certainly has an impact on how do we then open those tightly sealed steel doors? And then how do we also return to the expansive? So I think I use a lot of tools of Jungian psychology, which is about a connection to a collective consciousness. I use a lot of tools of dream work in that space and synchronicity. And I think that those are all powerful ways to, at the end of the day, get you back into that expansive,
And by the expansive, it's that feeling of there's like a higher power, something bigger than you, right?
Certainly it's a feeling of, it's what I describe as, this is how I teach the nervous system. So parasympathetic is sort of like everything's well, your body's, and this is what happens when you go to sleep and rest deeply, or when you're on a beach and you don't have to worry about a job or an email, when you're well and happy and you're like at ease, right? The opposite is that animal instinct, animal body, tight tension, fast heart rate, digestion's tight, right. Everything starts to be hyper vigilant, right? And that's contractive. So expansive, contractive, stress hormones, renewal of like all the good neurotransmitters and all of that.
I can feel it as you're talking. I can actually feel those emotions like, got to control or surrender.
Exactly. So in this, I'm leading a women's empowerment group in a course called Moon Lodge right now, co-leading it with my dear friend and amazing teacher, Lucia Horan, at Esalen Institute in Big Sur, but it's online. And so what we're doing at the very beginning of that course is we're all practicing living in expansion and contraction every day. Like, meaning that as soon as you get off this cool podcast, what is a step that you can take to choose to be expansive, right? And start then to it becomes quite simple, really. So then measure that window of, well, I know what I want to do after this is go take a nap. I'd like to have a cup of tea. I'd like to not do the work that I need to do this afternoon because I'm quite tired. What I need is actually a little nap, right? Instead, contraction is, it's Thursday. I'd like to have a great weekend. So I should get all my work done now. Also, what if I'm not getting back to them? Is that going to mean something? Am I going to lose an opportunity, right? So the difference is, and so as you just start to be like, well, let me just try to choose being in the expansive, what happens is you start to disarm that voice, that story that comes in to be like vigilant. And all the time, most of the time, it makes everything else just kind of run more smoothly and makes you, allows you to be truly available and present for what's actually coming your way, right?
And you talk a lot about noticing sort of synchronicities in your life. Like when you're more in the expansive, you can kind of tap in and see all these synchronicities that are going to help you on your fertility journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I think it's but I like that story, and I love that client from years and years ago that I shared in the book, a story of how I came up with I assigned her a synchronicity journal as a practice, right?
Yeah.
And in the book, I described the reason why we went with the synchronicity journal was because, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners and community will connect with this. She had done quite a lot in the spiritual world, right? She was from quite like a very California kind of commune, where it was holistic medicine and all the kind of alternative thinking consciousness was already what she grew up with. So when she had a recurring miscarriage and difficulty on her path, she returned to some of those experiences and would find herself being in a group of women who did feel a connection to their spirit babies, did feel a synchronicity, not synchronicity exactly, but like alignment or energetic information or dreams. And she wasn't feeling anything. And that for her meant it's not going to happen. Contraction, right? It's not for me. There's no message. I'm different than everybody else. Something's wrong with me. A lot of shame, right?
Mm-hmm.
So trying to build her back a roadmap of just more compassion, and also not necessarily a belief in a higher power, but just a belief in something unseen and unknown, right? And that's there and present, holding the path, holding her. And so I gave her the synchronicity journal. I was like, she was quite studious. She was very smart. I think she was a chemist or something like that. And so she started to I said, just track signs like that are synchronistic in a little journal. And the next session we had, it was so cool actually, because she came back and she said, the first time I experienced this, I was listening to a Bob Marley song came on, the one with the, what is it? The birds on the window, you know?
Oh,
Two little birds were on my window or something like this. Is a Bob Marley song. And she's like, I heard it. And I looked at my window and there were two little birds.
Ooh, it's happening.
And so she was then able to start, and from her own experience in her own way, starting to really, and it translated for her to wow, there's something else. There's something, whatever this is, like there's a flow of energy and I'm a part of it. And that really helped her then move into a space of more expansion, which again, at the end of the day, reduced her stress hormones. All my work at the end of the day is about reducing stress hormones, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's powerful. It's just kind of that surrender to, I guess, just relinquishing this control or this need to just figure everything out, right? But you've still got to tell us your story. I love the story.
I love my daughter. I have a very special daughter. I think she's I was driving through, if you read my book, you'll hear more about my upbringing, but it was a interesting one and a difficult one, but also one that put me into service very early on. So I had the opportunity of working with a lot of people who were sick and old and in traumatized states, because my father was a missionary and a pastor. So he was devoted to service himself. He wasn't a big church guy. He was go out in the streets and really help people who needed the most. So I got, dragged along to most everything he did. And because of my own health and kind of my own soul, I'm quite a sensitive soul, I really feel like I developed and was to some degree born with a pretty keen sense of intuition, sixth sense. We all have it, right? I think sometimes various situations for children will make that heightened earlier on. Certainly anybody who grows up in a home where there's a neglect or abuse has a heightened sense, and usually that makes them quite intuitive as well, right? You have to be in order to navigate and survive a difficult environment. But that being said, I left home pretty early. I graduated from high school early on, and I went out on the road a lot, camping. And in the United States, we have all these amazing national parks, and they're a really safe place to go be and to be in nature and to travel. But I was driving through West Texas, close to a place called Marfa. There's this really amazing art community now. And all of my ancestors are from that area. right? Originally, I'm what you call old school Texan in the States, although I live in New York City now. And as I was driving, I was 17, and as I was driving over a sort of small hill, it's quite bright. The light was shining in through the car, and it literally, like, I couldn't see. So I pulled over. And as I pulled over, I had a very clear vision, almost like you would think about a daydream or a dream in and of itself, but it was so present. And it was of me in a car and looking over a girl about, 8 or 9, with her hand out the window.
You still get emotional telling the story. Oh.
And she looked at me and she said, "Hey, Mom."
Wow.
And so I think because I was set up to I lived in such a spiritual life from the beginning, one that I had to definitely change paths from, because it wasn't the correct spiritual path for me. But I had an inclination to not distrust it, to believe in that vision, and to believe in that sight of her. And so I never really questioned it after that. I knew that she was with me. I knew that I was going to have this only child daughter. And I think because I felt that at 17 so early, and she was with me, and then I did the work of fertility work starting, when I was 25. I was ready to go right off the bat to get her here. And then it took some time for everything to be in the right circumstances for her to come. And since then, now she turns 10 very soon. And the what happens after she is here is also things I didn't plan for or expect, right? Like, life can be a dynamic and ever-changing place. So, but I do, people sometimes, a lot of times when people book sessions with me, one of the first things they want to know is, like, do I have souls connected to me? Are there baby souls connected to me? And, I did practice more in just the pure intuitive medical space for some time before I really felt, kind of returning to what I said about advocacy. I felt that it was more powerful to help people. It was going to be more powerful and more helpful, not only for a woman's healing or a couple's healing or family's healing, to be able to do that connection, to find that connection and that voice on their own through their own processing, versus just somebody like me coming to say, yeah, it's going to happen, right? Because when somebody says, yeah, it's going to happen, it's like, if you're in a lot of contraction, or you're still, all these other things are happening, it doesn't change your cells, you don't feel it in your heart as much.
Do you not think? See, I'd be really reassured if someone just said, you're okay, there are babies, that's it, go chill, like, it's fine, they'll come to you. But sure. You didn't find that?
No, I think that it's a mixture, honestly, and sometimes that certainly can help. And I definitely, it's definitely a part of the work I do share that with clients one-on-one, I do. And I tell them also, if I feel like there's difficulty, right? And it becomes quite complex, and we're getting into the energetics of conception from more of what's spiritual fertility kind of side, or spirit baby side, or more of a psychic fertility kind of side, right? There's some complexities there that are hard sometimes. Like, sometimes I'm thinking of a client now who I've been working with for some time, who was experiencing secondary infertility, right? And we got into the kind of, who also had a very difficult, extremely difficult childhood, and had to spend a lot of healing through her becoming a mom herself, right?
Yeah.
And what we found was that she was extraordinarily attached to the idea of her second child being a daughter, being a girl. And then she had several miscarriages, and the work that we did together was to through unconditional love and through what we decided together was the fact that she not that she wasn't, she was attached to her. She was attached to her being and her soul. But we also came to the conclusion that this wasn't the right timeline for her. So we gently invited her with love and respect, you know, to leave the room.
The spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We invited her to leave the room with love. And about 6 or 8 weeks after that, she became pregnant with a baby boy. And she is, I think, 7 glorious months pregnant now.
Wow. Oh my God.
So
my mind
you
is
see,
blown.
see, this is how the complexities of it's not just about spirit connection. It's about sometimes what I call kind of the cosmic air traffic control, right?
What does this all mean though? Like, why was she here in the first place? Why did she need to go? This has generated way more questions than answers.
Well, I mean, I think she was here for a reason. And as we dug into it, we could see a lot of what her attachment was to this child had a lot to do with her own experience of being her own inner child as a girl, a little girl, right? So there was a lot of projection and a lot of wanting to go back and do it better and right for the inner child. So it's almost like, I talk a lot about unconditional love as being the most powerful fertility drug, right? Unconditional love means it changes the whole playbook, right? I'll give you an example of this, Jodie. So like, say I'm having a fabulous party tomorrow night, it's Friday night. I'm going to make fires. I'm going to have the best food. All my friends who are beautiful souls, exceptional, compassionate, loving people are going to be there at 7:00. And so feel the difference of this, right? Jodie, I'm having this party. I want you to come, but I need you to be there at 7:00. Okay. 7 on the dot. That's when it's starting. If you're not there at like 7:01, 7:02, I might start texting you or calling you. Like, where are you? Why are you not here? Like, is something wrong? Like, you feel the anxiety and the story come in, right? Check this out comparatively. Jodie, I'm having a party at 7:00 tomorrow. Fabulous people. I'd like you to come whenever you want, right? The door is open.
I would definitely want to come to that party. I did not want to come to the other party, right? So much difference. Yeah.
So let's think about that as being a soul, a spirit. And let's start to think about the ways, even if we have a lot of love to give and we're ready to be a parent, what happens with conditionality around love, right?
Yeah.
And how that feels.
Wow.
So yeah, and that's the simplest way I can talk about what was happening in her scenario, right? There was some conditionality. That was a pregnancy that was not meant to, that was a fruition of a soul that was not meant to actualize in her life. Their karma was not for this life, perhaps another, right?
Do you know how much I'm biting my tongue to be like, can you see any spirit babies with me? I read these books and I'm like, I just want to know. But then again, is that forcing things? Okay, so I was actually going to ask you before we jumped on this podcast, because I had this weird thing, and I almost feel like in some respects, some things you're talking about, I can really relate to. I had this really clear vision of like this. I was like, there is a girl baby waiting for me. I like knew her name. Like, this is it. It's like, but then she's kind of gone, and I'm like, wait, maybe I need to like try hard for a girl if we're gonna try. There's this baby dust method, and like, it's like she's gone now. I can't feel her. Like, I feel like I've scared her off. And can you lose spirit? Can you scare off your spirit babies? Can you? I don't really know what I'm asking now. I'm just a bit like, what's this all about?
Well, Jodie, I would probably dive into where that's reflected in some trauma you've experienced in your own life, right? Which is the second chapter of my book, which is trauma experienced from this life. Like, I hear in that narrative, there's fear of what's happened when you have lost love before, right? There's fear of a scarcity, right? A fear of something not happening. And so I think that, again, like, there's the opportunity, right, to go into deeper healing when you're not getting pregnant when you want to. And it's important to do that work, because this is your life at the end of the day, right? And if I would be remiss if I wasn't, like, my client is not to some degree, it is the children who come in through my clients, which I have great fondness for and great love and feel very connected to. But my client is you in that scenario. My client is your life and your health, right? And your being and your actualization. So the opportunity then becomes like, let's dig into it and let's see, like, what's coming up, right? And let's just, like, let's name it. And with trauma or things that are painful or wounds, just naming them over and over again, bringing them to the light, really diffuses them. It really disarms them. So what you might find after doing some of that work is that her voice was still there. It was just the override of the story and the fear and your trauma that was getting in the way of hearing it, right?
Oh, interesting. I definitely feel, when you talk about more of that expansive feeling, I feel like when I'm not working and trying to get things done and like, I've got to do this and do that and be on time here and get back to this one, exactly as you said, I can almost like hear more of the spiritual side of things. It's really interesting. So many questions. I need to just stop the podcast and just ask you. When I'm sure people are listening and going, I just want to know what's going on with me. How can I address my blocks, and how can I find out more about my trauma, and how can I just kind of come more into the spiritual side on a fertility journey, other than getting your book, which is the best book ever?
Thank you.
How can people begin on this journey?
Take this, even tuning in or hearing it, as synchronicity, right? This already is a part of being on that path to being open to the spiritual connection, right? Even being here and listening, all the things that aligned in the timing of your day, or the choice to put this on instead of an audiobook, or, just randomly even showing up here, that is already it's an initiation, right? So that's also what I wanted to say to you a moment ago, is that a lot of times, once I have somebody and I'm working with somebody one-on-one, because listen, I'm not for everybody as a healer and practitioner. There are some people who really do better with the work of some other of my colleagues who practice in a different way than I do, right? I offer what I have, my soul has, my perspective, my education, my healing, right? So by the time somebody comes to work with me one-on-one, in person or online, I also tell them, that in and of itself is a sign that you're on the spiritual path, right? Because this is my life, this is my energy, this is my vibration, right? And to even if it's accidentally that you sign up for somebody, randomly gives you a session with me, that's already a part of that path unfolding, right? Yeah.
Okay. And how can we transform fear? Is it just about because I can hear the women I work with just going, yeah, okay, tuning into the expansive, trying to calm my nervous system. Yeah, I've got that. Okay, fine. But I've been on this road for so many years and I've had so much difficulty. I'm now in a point where I can't stop worrying about this. Will it ever happen for me? What can they do?
It's hard. It's hard. I'm not saying, I mean, none of this work is, it's none of it's easy work, but I like the two quotes, one of which is from a Robert Frost poem, which is that the only way out is through, right? And the second one, which is sort of my motto in life, is to do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain, right? Do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. So when you're in a prolonged fertility journey and you have a lot of fear, you're overcome by the contraction or why it's not going to happen, or the trauma has built up, right? The process itself has become one that's added more trauma to your life. It's sometimes you have to do something quite radical in that space in order to really shift it and move it. And that's the invitation of real suffering as a human being, right? This is the core of Buddhism, is that you suffer as a human being and then you evolve and change, because it really sucks to sit in suffering, right? So I would say to try and keep perspective, keep like a bird's eye perspective on the person they are now and what they have gained in insight and wisdom and humility or self-knowledge, right? Maybe how much more truthful of a person they are, how much more vulnerable of a person they are, or how much more broken of a person, how much more angry of a person. You know, whatever has come as a part of that journey is not invaluable, right? There's something that has been important about that too. And as far as like how then to gain more alignment, to get the energy and the allegiance to keep on listening to that voice, which is like, no, I am going to be a mother this lifetime. It is supposed to happen to me. I hear this voice. I know this intuition is mine. I know it's going to happen. I need more support. I need more help. I need a different perspective. I need something. I need more. I need something to shift, right? Women are very powerful. And we have endured and carried children through the darkest ages of this earth, right? And sometimes in our own life, there's a kind of a microcosm of that, like the darkness, the dark night of the soul, as they call it, right? So I hear you. And I wish I had easy fixes for the suffering. I wish I did. But I do believe, and I've seen this over and over again, that a lot of times things make sense looking back.
Yes, I really believe in this as well. Yeah, I did a podcast a couple of episodes ago where I was talking about this, you know, even just from a lighter perspective, where I had the most crippling period pains and it was horrific and I had no idea what was going on and why. And it led me, I had absolutely no interest in fertility or hormones or anything whatsoever, but it's led me completely down this path, which I wouldn't have happened had I not had that horrific time. So, and I really believe in that.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, spiritual fertility is my offering, my guidebook for some of the things that I think are helpful for folks who are in that place.
Yeah, it's such an amazing book. I mean, not only do you share stories, but you've also got exercises at every point. I particularly love your mission of kindness exercise.
Oh, I'm glad you like that one. That's nice. Thank you.
It's just, you know, for anyone that's listening and you want to delve more into this spiritual side, the book is fantastic. You know, there's with the mission of kindness, it's like, if you're feeling overwhelmed and obsessing about over whether the next pregnancy test will be positive or negative, then volunteer work is your remedy. Ask your intuitive guides to lead you to a place where service is needed. I just think that's such an interesting, like refreshing point.
Yeah.
And there's everything from tracking your dreams to just flicking through, tracking your dreams to looking at blocks that might be limiting you and what pillars you need to support your spirit. And I think it's such a great Bible that everyone needs on this journey. It's fantastic. So thank you so much. And if people want to work with you more and have support on this path, what's the best way to find you? What do you offer? How can people get in touch with you?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for your kind words. It's quite it's quite vulnerable to write a book where you're really sharing so much of as an introvert, the details of one's life, right? But thank you for those kind words. I appreciate it, and I'm very grateful to everybody who's supported my work in this lifetime. I've been lucky to be able to do this my whole life. So I offer both in-person sessions and online virtual sessions at my website, drjulievaughn.com, under services. There are several different offerings there. I try to make my work inclusive and available to everyone. I do my best to, set aside as much time as I can and in my own life and busy life to make sure there's availability for everybody, and I try to accommodate everyone. I also am leading a workshop called Moon Lodge, which is very dear to my heart, which is an online workshop which can be found online and downloaded too. And we have in-person retreats as well happening. That's a powerful integration of, it includes people who have had difficulties in their fertility path. It includes people who have lost children as grown women, whose children have been murdered or died of cancer. It includes people who have suffered many traumas, right? But the point of it is that sitting together as women, and as I look at my own evolution going forward in my work and as a healer, I'm really, for me, it's this intersection of doing the personal work of healing and all that entails, from the nutritional, the holistic, the body, the spiritual, and then bringing that and sharing it with the group. I believe in the intersection and the power of individual work within a group. I think it's very powerful and important, especially now, for women to gather.
Completely agree. Completely. Yeah, I feel like there's a big calling for it. It's almost like returning back to Mother Earth and to where women were just together. I often talk about like the moon lodges, red tents, where women would just like go during their periods and just do nothing. And I would love to bring that back.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
I wish we were closer. Come to England.
I'd give you a hug.
I know, I'd love to.
I love the UK. I love Europe. I'm coming as soon as like everything's more open. I'll be there.
I'll be in your kitchen. Welcome.
I'm coming to your kitchen.
That is amazing. I will make us smoothies. We can chat about spirit babies all day long. Oh, it'd be amazing. Thank you so much. So where can people find you?
drjulievaughn.com. I'm on Instagram too with Dr. Julie Vaughn. I'm try and spread myself in other places, but those are the best places to find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And for anyone that's looking on YouTube, get this book. Amazing. Thank you so much.
And thank you all for listening and finding this moment today. I appreciate the chance to share and to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.